The biggest culture shock you'll ever experience in your whole life is the culture shock you experience after returning to your home country after living abroad, especially as an American. And if you don't believe me, believe them, because in this video, we will be reacting to Americans experiencing reverse USA culture shocks after living abroad. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this first video.
I live in Mexico, but I'm visiting my family in Texas right now, and there's a lot of reverse culture shock moments. I've mentioned a few,
So it's pretty interesting because I'm from Texas as well. One thing that you might not know about Texas if you have never been there is that Texas is heavily influenced by Latino culture. So there are a lot of Mexican people there, and the culture is very prevalent in day-to-day life. A lot of times you'll see signs that are in English and then Spanish underneath. Things of that nature. The way people dress, the music, so on and so forth. So the fact that you can experience that degree of reverse culture shock while returning from one place that literally borders the other place, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting how these imaginary lines that people drew in the past can make this much of an impact on our psyches.
One, I got unaccustomed to having the air conditioning on blast. Two, the malls here in Texas, maybe.
So to your point about the air conditioning, Texas is a very hot place, but I assume Mexico is as well. At least the part of Mexico that I've been to, from what I recall, it was pretty hot. In fact, I think that's the only time I've ever actually gotten sunburned in my whole entire life. So I don't know if maybe they just don't use the AC because they use fans, or they just leave the windows open, things of that nature. But I know in Texas, you're really never gonna come across a place that doesn't have AC. And if you do, the place is likely not going to have anyone there, because the temperatures out there are just brutal.
Maybe the US in general are just nothing like the malls in Mexico. Mexico definitely has way better malls. And for part 3 today,
that's pretty interesting about the malls, because Dallas in particular, but also Houston, but especially Dallas, is known for having a lot of really high-end malls. You have North Park Mall, Stonebriar Mall, Grapevine Mall. You have the Galleria Mall. That's just off the top of my head. There are many malls there because really there isn't much else to do in Dallas other than shop. But it's interesting that a lot of these foreign countries, I know here in Thailand, we have a mall in Pattaya that is unlike any mall I've ever seen in my life. Nothing in Dallas compares to it at all. Houston Galleria doesn't compare to it. The mall is maybe 7 or 8 stories high, and it's just insanely huge. It's insanely huge. There's so much selection there, and I know that most Asian countries that cater to Western tourists have malls like this. So it's pretty interesting to hear that that's also the case in Mexico.
today, this one is actually coming from my teenage daughter. She was really surprised at how many panhandlers, how many people there are in the streets asking for money. She was explaining to my family over here, she was like, Grandma, in Mexico, if somebody needs money, they will work in the streets, they'll sell something, they'll clean your windshields. If they're able to work, they'll do something for work. My mom was saying that Mexicans just tend to be very hardworking people.
That's true. That is very true. It's a stereotype, and I try not to kind of delve into those stereotypes, but that one I have found to be fairly true. Growing up in Texas, it's kind of a known thing that Mexicans are generally the hardest working people that you will come across.
She said, encuentra una manera de ganar dinero. There's definitely a hustle culture mindset. And even if they have nothing to sell, nothing else to offer, what I've seen a lot of people in Mexico do is they'll try to fix the roads for tips. Not saying that you don't see any panhandlers or any beggars in Mexico. It definitely happens. But for the most part, they're selling something, or they're cleaning your windshield, or they're fixing the road. They're trying to do something to earn a couple of coins.
Providing value. They're trying to provide value in exchange for the money. That is true. In the US, you have a lot of people who are literally just asking for handouts and nothing more. And of course, there are a variety of different reasons why they could have ended up like that. But it's just insane. It's insane that panhandling culture is even a thing in a country that always claims to be the wealthiest on the planet, even though it's only really the wealthiest by GDP, to my knowledge. It's just crazy. Absolutely insane. On to the next video.
So we just moved back to America after about 7 years in Europe, and we're having some major reverse culture shocks, so here we go. For some context, we lived in small town Germany for about 3 years, and then small town Italy for 3 years as well. And I know my hand is orange, by the way. I forgot to wash after self-tanning. This is shocking to say because we're both from the Midwest, but it took us years to stop asking people how you are every time you see them. Hey, how are you? At the gas station, at the store, whatever, because you don't typically.
That does seem like a pretty uniquely American thing. I wonder if you're from Canada, let me know if Canadians do that as well, because I know for sure Europeans don't really do that. Europeans might greet you, they might say, hey, whatever, but they're not necessarily going to ask you how you're doing, because really they know that nobody actually cares. And I don't want to put it like that because it makes it seem like European people are just mean or something, but that's not the case. It's just that those little formalities, or whatever you want to call them, they just have no place in European culture, especially a place like the Netherlands, where I spent a year, actually 14 months living, where the culture is known for its directness. They're not going to engage in that type of small talk when they know it's not going to lead anywhere. And that's one thing I really, really admire about Dutch culture, especially as an introvert.
You don't typically do that, especially in Germany, unless you know someone. And now that we're back here and everyone is, hey, how are you? How's your day? I stop and I'm like, how am I? And I don't have a response. I'm not ready for it. It's not fluid anymore. And it's hard to get used to. And I can't believe I'm saying that. But yeah, it's certainly weird. I know this is obvious because we lived in very affordable places, but we moved from Indiana to small town Germany to small town Italy to Washington, D.C. area. So the price of wine and coffee, the bar we lived above in Chile, our
Wine and coffee. How about everything? How about existing in general? DC is no joke when it comes to the cost of living.
last town, wine was $1.50 per glass, and now that we're here, you walk around and the happy hour price for a glass of wine, you'll see $10 happy hour wine. And I'm like, oh my God. Shocking. While we're on the topic of alcohol.
So I don't drink alcohol, never even had a sip. Let me know in the comments how much wine costs where you live. Because, again, I don't really have a reference point myself because I've never purchased it before.
The size of shots here. Like if you order a shot of tequila, it feels huge. I remember when we first moved to Germany, we had ordered 2 shots and they gave us like a teaspoon amount of tequila. And now that we're here, when we first got here, we went out and we ordered tequila shots, and I had never been so accidentally drunk in my entire life. Being carded also is so weird, especially because in Europe, like I've bartended in Europe and I didn't even have to ask 16-year-olds for their ID, you know? So it's weird to think about bringing your ID out and people asking for it and not seeing children in the bars anymore, which is nice. It was always weird to see kids at the bar, but yeah.
I never really thought about that. So yeah, in Germany, I think you can drink at 16 years old, right? So you just have 16-year-olds in bars. I never considered that image in my head before. When I was 16, I was a kid mentally, so I can't even imagine just walking into a bar and ordering a beer or whatever and being around a bunch of 20 or 30 somethings. But I guess that's normal for people in Europe.
Definitely strange. Refills. I remember when we first moved and we had ordered a Coke at dinner, and then they give you a can, and then you ask for another one and they give you another can, and they charge you for each can or bottle or whatever you get. And now being here, I can't really fathom needing 2 Cokes at dinner or 3 Cokes or 4, you know. I remember being younger and getting like 6 cherry Cokes with dinner. But now it's like I have my one, and I'm like, okay, I don't need.
That's a pretty big reason why we have an obesity crisis in the US. I say we, I don't even live in the US anymore, but why the US has an obesity crisis is because those free refills, they add up quick, and those liquid calories are no joke. Liquid calories are no joke. Calories are calories. Your body's going to process them the same way. So those 6 Cokes, that's going to add up quickly, expeditiously.
I don't need a refill. Thanks. The speed of restaurant service here, it feels so fast coming from Europe. I remember when we first got there and we would sit at a table and like you'd be sitting for like half an hour before anyone even acknowledged that you were there or, brought you a menu or brought you drinks. And it was shocking, because in America you're trained to turn tables, get in and out, be able to get in a restaurant on your lunch break. I used to bartend in Germany and I had bartended and served in the States for years. And I remember serving these German guys and they had, a quarter of a beer left. I was like, oh, would you like another beer? And they were like, no. And I was like, or no, not yet. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll be back. And, they sat there for hours and their beer's warm and they finished their beer. And I came back and I was like, would you like another beer? And they're like, not yet. And they're like clearly irritated by me. And I was like, what's the deal? And I realized that the service style in Europe is just so slow and relaxed, and people go to a restaurant to enjoy their time, and they don't like to be harassed.
Yeah, and the reason why they're able to have it set up that way is because the servers actually make a livable wage. Or at the very least, they're not making $2 per hour and relying solely on tips. Because when you rely solely on tips, it behooves you to get as many people into your zone. That's what they call it at restaurants whenever you are a server. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but basically you want to get as many people in and out of your zone as you possibly can within your shift so you can maximize your tips. That's not a thing in Europe because tipping is completely voluntary. It's not ethically required or morally obligated. You just tip based on your own generosity, and that's the way it should be.
So now coming back to the States, like I don't feel harassed or bothered by it, but I definitely notice that it's like fast, fast, fast. Like, here's your drink, here's your order, here's your appetizer. All right, see you. Checks there before you even finish your food. So it's hard to get used to the flip side of that, but it was so much harder, I think, to get used to the slow service. The speed limits and the highways, it just feels like you are crawling here. Germany has the Autobahn, and Italy, no one gives a shit about the speed limit, so it's kind of a free-for-all. Like coming here and hitting a 55 mile per hour speed limit on the highway is shocking. It is a culture shock.
That's even a culture shock within the US because 55 miles per hour. I do remember when my girlfriend and I took our cross-country road trip earlier this year when we were in the US, there were places that had incredibly low speed limits. And some of the places had speed limits, so upper speed limits, that were the same as other places' minimum speed limits, which I found crazy. Usually right around 55 miles per hour. I don't know what that is in kilometers per hour. I'll put that on the screen right now. But I don't really see the point in having speed limits that slow. Just have better driving schools so that people can become better drivers so that they can handle higher speeds, have better roads so that it's safer to drive at higher speeds, and things will move a lot more efficiently.
It feels so slow. Okay, and last one for now is not needing cash everywhere, like at least in small town Italy and Germany, in cities too. You need cash. Like if you buy a coffee or a water bottle or something and it's under €2 or €3, they don't want to run their card. But it's actually so opposite here. There's so many places that don't even accept cash anymore. So I don't think we've had an American dollar out of the ATM actually since we've been here, but we still have euros left over because
So I beg to differ. My experience was actually kind of the opposite. Granted, I was in the Netherlands, so maybe things are different in Germany and Italy. Well, evidently they are because, her experience is her experience. I'm not here to invalidate it. But in the Netherlands, I don't really recall ever needing cash for anything. Ever. I mean, from public transit to whatever I would get at the stores, no matter how small of a quantity I would get, I could always use my card. Granted, I did have a bit of a hiccup with trying to use my American card in some of the Dutch stores, but I was able to use my Dutch card once I got my Dutch card pretty much everywhere I went. I don't recall ever needing cash. In the US, on the other hand, New Jersey, they have a toll system where you basically have to have cash. Either you need the Easy Pass, which of course only locals are going to have that, or you have to have cash. And not only that, but I think, if I recall correctly, you might need to have exact change, which makes no sense to me. It blew my mind, and I literally ended up spending over $100 on tolls there because I didn't have cash on me and I didn't understand how the system worked. Different discussion for a different day. But some places in the US are not only backwards, but scandalous, predatory, and New Jersey is most certainly one of them. But to my knowledge, in Germany at least, again, I don't know how it is in other European countries, but in Germany, a lot of times the reason why they won't let you use your card for small transactions, it's actually like that here in Thailand as well. They won't let you use your card for smaller transactions because they get charged a merchant fee or something to that effect, where basically it really, really eats into their profit margins. So it makes sense in that regard. I wouldn't consider it to be predatory. And given the context, I also wouldn't consider it to be backwards, but I can see how that would be very, very different.